today's podcast, I'm speaking with Chris O'Shea. Chris has a keen interest in e-commerce and where VAT fits in the whole world of online selling. In our last podcast, we spoke about the importance of VAT compliance for online sellers. Today, we're going to speak about the topic of risk, specifically the risk that exists for online sellers when they're not declaring VAT from cross-border sales. So, Chris, when it comes to risk in cross-border e-commerce, most people automatically think of payment fraud, but the area of VAT is a pretty big one too. Can you tell us a little about what is happening?
Hi Quaylen. Yes, I should be clear from the start in saying that when it comes to VAT and cross-border selling, there are only risks for those who are what we call non-compliant. In other words, they are not adhering with the VAT rules and regulations in a particular country, when in fact they should be. On the other side, you have sellers who take their tax affairs seriously. They are accounting for VAT correctly, as well as filing the reporting and doing the filing according to country-specific rules. These sellers are also keeping the right tax documents and will have the detailed support that's needed to prove their VAT compliance, just in case there are audits or questions from the VAT authorities.
So, VAT compliance, or rather non-VAT compliance, is a big topic nowadays.
That's right. When sellers are selling their products to consumers in other countries, they need to make sure that they're complying with the correct VAT laws of that country. With the economic downturn of recent years, governments all over the world have been looking at ways to address tax deficits. So the topic of VAT non-compliance has reached the top of many governments' agendas. What this means is that tax authorities are pretty tough on collecting VAT from foreign online sellers.
So, what kind of things are we talking about? What are the authorities doing?
Well, a lot of cooperation happens between the different tax authorities across European Union countries. They are sharing information between themselves so they can identify sellers who are non-compliant. Also, almost all authorities are looking at sellers' web shops and marketplace stores. And what they're doing is placing mystery orders and seeing how VAT is actually treated at the point of checkout. So if they suspect that the seller is selling quite a lot into their country and not charging the correct VAT rate, then they get suspicious.
And what else are the authorities doing?
Well, the authorities have dedicated units set up just focusing on e-commerce sellers. It's worth knowing too that the tax authorities, they are pretty PR savvy, and you will often see articles in the newspapers describing how successful they have been in tracking down online sellers who are non-compliant. Also, they have become pretty sophisticated in terms of new audit techniques and using things like risk scoring, which is working well for them. By way of example, in Germany, the tax authorities carried out a special tax audit in 2012, which generated an extra 2.3 billion euro in revenue. These special audits weren't undertaken on top of the general audits they carry out.
And what happens when the authorities find out if a seller is non-compliant?
If a seller is found to be behind on their tax payments or non-compliant within a member state, then they are forced to repay all of the tax owed, plus interest and fines of up to 200% of the total VAT liabilities, depending on the jurisdiction involved. In some countries, VAT can be backdated up to 10 years, along with interest on the unpaid VAT, penalties, and interest on the unpaid penalties. So as you can imagine, this all adds up pretty quickly. And a saying goes that it is far more costly to be non-compliant than it is to be compliant. But we're not just talking about financial penalties. The reality is that the authorities have the power to seize products not only at the first port of arrival into the European Union, but also after they have been imported and while they are in transit.
So, what can be done?
Not declaring VAT to the correct authorities can be interpreted as tax avoidance, and in some jurisdictions fraud, or even a criminal offence. So my message to sellers who have doubts about any aspects of their VAT situation would be to speak with an expert and clarify what they need to do.
It is an important topic, Chris. and I'd like to thank you for clarifying lots of things which may be new to listeners. Join us in our next podcast when we continue to talk about the topic of VAT in the world of e-commerce.